I can go through this notice of appeal again with you, and I will just quickly, so try to cover any questions. And if you have any questions about this notice, please ask me and I'll refer back to it. Most people check the far left box, the real property, residential or commercial. There are appeals on other property types, and we're certainly taking those now. The boxes here, I'm not going to tell you which to check, but typically people are having an issue with their value. So the value box is the box that they would check. Some people think that their property is not assessed like other properties like their property. That's a uniformity issue. So they can also check that. But checking uniformity or value is probably going to be 98, 99% of the appeals. We've had, I believe, 2 appeals that have come in because their homestead exemption was either denied or removed. So we have had a couple of those. Breach of covenant and denial of covenant, we've had none. Taxability, I did see one of the appeal forms with taxability check, but I do think that was an error. They're probably just frustrated in checking anything that looked right. Most real estate that individuals are appealing is taxable. The other side of this portion of the appeal form, most would check Board of Equalization. That's the board I discussed earlier. Members were invited to a meeting. I stated 2 weeks ago that those members are appointed by the clerk of Superior Court. That's incorrect. They're appointed by the grand jury, and that came out in the meeting, but I just want to clarify my statement there. She, the clerk, oversees the Board of Equalization, those boards. Arbitration is also an option. That costs money because you have to get an appraisal. Now, let me just state right now, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. The appeal itself costs no money. I highly recommend that you don't go out and buy an appraisal or hire an attorney because that costs money. You can see by the number of appeals we processed, half of them were recommended for reduction. And when I say recommended, that's what's taken to the Board of Assessors, and they approve or deny that recommendation. So half of the appeals that we've had, we've recommended reduction. I've only seen one appraisal, and that was just because the gentleman had an appraisal done on a refinance of his property several months ago, so he included that. There's no reason to pay the money to get an appraisal on an appeal when you send it in. We're going to review it as a process, and we're going to have a recommendation. If you don't like our recommendation, if you don't like the reduction or the no change, and if you want to, then get an appraisal or then get an attorney if you feel like you're best represented that way. There's no need to do that. There's no need to spend that money in the beginning of the appeal process. I can't reiterate that enough. That owner stated value, it says required, and somebody asked by what code is that required. Department of Revenue in the code section says that the owner needs to put a value in there. This is a form that comes from Department of Revenue. When you put that value in there, you are protecting yourself. If you submit an appeal form with no value in there, let's just say that we don't process and file or render a decision on your appeal in 180 days, and we have no extension. Then we're at fault, and your stated value would become your assessed value for 17. If we don't do our job, or something is wrong with the way we did our job, your stated value is going to be your value for 17. So if you don't put a value there, and we, for some odd reason, which we will not get these done, but if we expired on the 180 days and you didn't have a value there, it's not going to be what you want it to be. It's going to be something different than you want it to be. So put your indication of value there. The other two, hearing officers for properties in value of excess of $750,000, and you can always appeal directly to Superior Court, bypassing these other forms of appeal. That costs money unless you're going to represent yourself. There's also a filing fee of $25 that's involved with appealing to court. And then the bottom is who's filling out the paperwork. You're the owner or an agent. We require a letter of authorization. The state requires a letter of authorization, so we know the owners actually authorized the person talking to us to discuss value. Your mailing address, phone numbers that we can reach you at. Email address is extremely important. We'd love to email you information as opposed to the print cost involved with printing out documents. And then any additional comments at the bottom. You can also provide additional pages, and we'll take all pages that you provide.